Hey, all you whiskey fans. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the US Prohibition. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about what the US Prohibition of alcohol did to the rest of the world. Because it wasn't just the US who was affected, many other countries were. And probably none more than Ireland. Before we get into how it affected them, it might be good to start at the beginning or way back in history to kind of set a level or a standard. What's important to keep in mind is that Ireland, one of their major exports or kind of consumers of their whiskey was the US, the Americas. And this was quite interesting because what it meant is they were making a lot of money importing their whiskey into the US. Now, why was it so popular? Probably because we got a lot of Irish immigrants, a lot of the distilleries, and the people in the Americas were fans of Irish whiskey, not single malts, but kind of different mash bills. And you can see this not only in the recipes that we use in the US, but also because we write whiskey with an E, versus what I mean is Key, not KY, like the Scots and others use. So during, or let's say before Prohibition, Ireland was making a killing, producing great whiskeys. They had many distilleries, and then bam, comes the US Prohibition. And with this, not only a great reduction in the amount of whiskey that they can export and sell, but along the same lines, something quite interesting happened. Ireland finally got their independence in 1922 from the UK. This was good and bad. So the people were, of course, now free, or let's say not free, but no longer under the United Kingdom's umbrella. But this also meant that they lost their export rights to all colonies of the United Kingdoms. This included Canada as a good example. So a lot of their possible exports, let's say channels or drinkers of Irish whiskey, slowly started to dissipate and they had less and less options. This was also made a little bit worse by the fact that the Irish government was thought to be promoting its own Irish population to be drinking more of their own whiskey beverages, and this also had mixed feelings. But what's important is US Prohibition drastically reduced the number of distilleries in Ireland. In the 1960s, quite a few distilleries, for instance, some really well-known names, Powers, Jameson, and Cork Distilling, kind of got together and they opened up what happened or was later called, and we still know today, as the Irish Distillers. And this became a kind of a group or a hub where all these different distilleries got together, kind of put all their resources and their expertise and made all of these different Irish whiskies that we know and we love today. Two holdouts which stayed kind of independent the longest were Bushmills and Middleton's, but they too had to, or were eventually bought out and became also part of the Distillers, Irish Distillers Company. This happened in 1972. Now, Bushmills Distillery was actually able to take some of their whiskey and actually sell that into, or import it still into the US as medical whiskey, which, as we talked about before, was a huge amount of whiskey. I'm not really sure how much Bushmills was able to get into the US legally, import and sell, but I hope it was a lot, and probably in their eyes it could have been even a little bit more. Now, Irish Distillers is quite known to this day. A lot of the different whiskies coming out of Ireland are distilled and produced there under multiple different brands and names. Now, this is slowly changing because Ireland is catching up at a very quick rate, and they are making not only some fantastic whiskeys, but also a lot of new, smaller distilleries are popping up. But Irish Distillers did a very good job of not just making one whiskey and marketing it differently, but still keeping true to different distilling processes, practices, number of distillations, and size of stills. And even to this day, one thing that they do quite well, and I'm really excited about, is they have the Method and Madness project. Now, for those of you which know or have tried a Method in Madness kind of bottling and release, well, let me say it like this. Usually I tell you Irish whiskey, you think of Jameson, you think of something you shoot and forget. But there are some amazing Irish whiskeys out there. This being one of them, but I mean, I love, for instance, a Redbreast. I have a little copper bird feeder in the back. But for instance, the Method in Madness is just showing again that with an Irish whiskey, you can create some amazing flavors, and the number and amount of experimentation coming out of Ireland is quite amazing and quite interesting. Even Jameson has a new lineup of different finishes, which are all really good. This version of Method in Madness here, I want to say this is batch number 2, but what makes this one really special is the fact that it's matured in bourbon and sherry casks, but then finished in Japanese cedar wood. So I don't know if you've ever tried a whiskey that was finished in Japanese cedar wood. I haven't, and it was quite an amazing find when we first got it and were able to try it. We were very happy with it, and I have to say it's been an all-time favorite of mine. This one still isn't opened, as you can see here, but that's only because the first bottle didn't last so long, and I'm trying to make this one make it a little bit longer. But it just goes to show you again that the American kind of thirst and excitement for whiskey was so greatly seen and such a good asset around the world that when Prohibition started, not only did the American market break down, but also the Irish. Now, this also helped some people, the Scots, for instance. This is when they really found an opportunity and expanded tremendously throughout the world and picked up a lot of steam and made a lot of headway, which they still take advantage to this day, and kind of why they're such a big importer of whiskey, and they established such a big name for themselves. They were able to continue distilling, they had a market that needed whiskey, and they had the stock when Prohibition ended to jump in there and fulfill a need, versus the Irish, which a lot of distilleries closed down, shut down, and consolidated, did not have such a big stock ready to provide the world and the Americas, not to mention other British colonies. But with that, I'm really excited to what comes next for Irish distilleries, new ones, and also experimentation and new products like this, because I love whiskey. And usually they're really good, so I can't complain. But yes, until then, to all you Irish drinkers out there, cheers to you and your next glass or bottle of Irish whiskey.